Hi Ivan, and let's break down your animations. So first off, everything looks pretty good so far, even if you're unsure about things. They look pretty good. So let's start by looking at this first animation and talking a bit about simplifying motion into very simple shapes and then using that as a base. So essentially what we do with that is create a guide that helps us uh, navigate the motion without the complexity of the design. And this is a thing mostly for initial understanding of the element and for planning things out very broadly, very generally, when we're studying really complex animation. So we wouldn't do this for every animation, and in fact, it's way easier to fuck up the design if you do it like that. But it helps us uh, make sure that we understand the underlying principles and the underlying complexity of the motion without delving too deep into the design. So how could we use primitives? So, well, I think you viewed them quite well here. Uh, and let's, for example, use the primitives here to simplify and understand this animation. So you're asking about this, and this is a pretty complex animation. And why is it complex? So what's the general motion of the fire? So the general motion of the fire is masses rising up. So essentially, it's a really simple concept. So the masses go up, decrease in size, and break up into particles. That's pretty much what's happening. So in this example, they're going almost straight up. The curve is very slight, and there is a slight change in the curve at the very end. So if we essentially I'm tracking this edge here. So you see it goes here, goes here, goes here. And so this edge goes along this curve. So if we draw a guide, our guide will look like this for this edge. And every time we are going on this edge, on this path, and we start going a bit slower at the start, then we accelerate here, then we go slower here, and even slower here. So that's our general motion. So the same thing here, but the curve is more clear and pronounced. So we see we go, 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 and then go in a curve here. And again, we start a bit slower, we go a bit faster in the middle, and then slow down here. So again, essentially, this is the same thing, but the curve is slightly different. So why is this a bit harder? Well, in this one, the curve goes the opposite way at the very end. So this adds a layer of complexity of, okay, how do we add this rotation without breaking the motion at the very end? So again, it's the same thing. We go slower at the start, a bit faster here, a bit slower at the end. But we add this element of rotation and the curve is pointing backwards at the very end. So how can we use primitives here to really make it way more simple for us? So I'll use a very big broad brush and I will track the bigger masses in the animation. And we're not matching everything 100%. Essentially, we are just making sure that we track the majority of the motion. And let's go back and track it back. And we see our bubbles. We could drag the size a bit better, but really, that's not the point. The point is really finding out this path. And then let's drag the other side. Use a slightly different color. Okay, so what do we get here? What do we get here, indeed? So we have essentially a set of two masses for the most part, two big masses going at the same time, creating a loop, one on the left, one on the right. They have quite a big delay, so when one mass here, the other mass is only in the middle, or even less than the middle, so the distance is 2/3, 1/3. So we're keeping interesting design. And then we go, and again, the masses are not right next to each other, they're shifted so that we create an interesting flow. So we're not doing this, we are doing this. And this is the base scene that this animation is structured upon or around. So we are creating this curve, and this curve is moving. But then we notice that at the edges, at the ends, it starts going and curving back. So if we track it, we'll get, again, oh, we'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acceleration, acceleration, slow down, acceleration, and the slow down at the very end. And then we continue the curve up. So this is our second curve. So again, boom. So when we combine that, we essentially get this motion. And I can disable this layer, and we're left with the guide and these masses. And essentially these masses define what's happening in the animation. And they help us create motions and create guides that later we can use for actual animation of the scene. The downside, if you're just going right over the guides without any consideration of design, it's not going to turn out great design-wise. So what we are doing is just using it as a guide, as a motion, kind of as something to help us understand the motion or help us plan the motion out, plan how to loop things out, and not just something that we call like a rough animation or even nothing, of course, like final animation. But it just helps us understand what's happening. And we can use that to create our own base for the motion. So we know that the fire rises. So we can always create some kind of guide and then create a couple masses going on one pass, on the second pass. And this can be useful at the start when we are just coming up with scenes or if we are unsure what we want to do, when we are more or less clear, it's better to just start with the design, with the masses designed right away, because it will give us more options and it will give us more natural way of working with the animation. But this is a useful thing when the animations are too complex. Then we simplify it, or if we need to understand the motion, either on the reference or the motion of the thing that we're trying to animate ourselves, we can do these things to help us figure it out. So for example, this is one edge, and then remembering that we need to have a delay. For example, I'll put the other edge here, animated on a different path. And then I'm going back, animating it back. And then, for example, I can go again and try to come up with a way to combine them. But again, this is just a guide. I can do whatever I want with design, given I know what I have in mind. I can add extra shapes, I can add extra forms. For example, we have something like this, and then, okay, so this edge is what this orange scene tracks, and this edge is what this green scene tracks, and this edge is what this orange scene tracks. So going from that, we can sort of figure out, okay, so how do we want to connect it? And then we'll make some variations, we'll end up changing the path a bit, and we can end up changing this entire scene and this entire motion, but this was our starting point. So this is kind of the very rough way to figure out the general motion. And if we figured it out, we can do whatever we want and change it however we want. The point is is that it helps us understand it better. And if it did, then its job is done. And of course, we still need to understand, okay, so this edge goes here. We still preserve the passes of other edges that we are not tracking, because we shouldn't forget about these. And again, it only helps us with the motion. The design and the shapes is on us. And then we see, okay, so this edge goes here, and the orange scene rotates, so we need to start adding a bit of rotation to this particle, and we need to start pushing it here to the left to make it connect with this orange mass and to make it connect with the later scene that we drew here. Oops. Here. Then we erase it here. It becomes very small. And the thing goes over here. So we start moving the edge here more. And again, I'm already going slightly away from this edge, slightly away from our guide, because I know that, again, it's a suggestion, it's a general way to help us get the right motion, but it's not a limiting factor. We are using it as a general guide, not a truth and beyond and all. Be all and all. And I can get more and more specific about the motion. I can add more and more frames. Can start changing up the shape here. We see how this green scene starts going higher and higher. Can start introducing some extra shapes here. This scene rotates even more, and again follows roughly this orange dot. And we keep erasing it out. And I can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on with this animation. So I hope this helps you understand the general reason why I'm doing this and the general process. And I have to think about the design way more here. Here we're adding some delay on this edge. Again, thinking about the change of design here. Maybe we can add some stuff here and there, add additional holes and things. And I'm still tracking all the edges myself. Can't fully rely on the guides. That's not what they're for. And that's pretty much it. I'll save it. And we'll go over some of your stuff now.